There's a few things that you want to avoid so that you don't end up with disaster on closing day. I'm Santosh from Calgary REI Hub. Today I wanted to talk about things you should do, especially to avoid issues on closing day. If you're purchasing a property, either on the buying side or the selling side, there's a few things that you want to avoid so that you don't end up with disaster on closing day. So the first things first, on closing day, you want to make sure that you avoid scheduling movers or having tenants lined up to move in on closing day itself. There's a few reasons why we recommend against doing this. Typically, what we've seen so far is sometimes on closing day, lenders are late to advance funds. So if funds are received late by the lawyer, the funds don't reach the other party. Typically, the funds don't reach the seller's lawyer in time. So closing can get pushed back later in the day or even pushed to the next day in some cases. So if you have movers lined up for that day, or if you have tenants lined up to move in that day, that could be pretty problematic because you technically won't have possession. So then you're stuck paying your mover twice, you're paying extra fees, and you have to sort out your tenants if they're not able to move in that day. One thing you want to do before closing day to avoid potential issues is doing a pre-possession walkthrough. So if you're buying, typically using a realtor, make sure you get your realtor to go with you to the property and perform a pre-possession walkthrough. This is a very, very important step that we want to emphasize. Do not skip over your pre-possession walkthrough. And here's why. When you go to a pre-possession walkthrough, you're essentially looking at the property to ensure that it's in substantially the same condition as when you viewed it, and that all the appliances, all the attached goods, like your shed in the backyard and all your appliances and all that kind of stuff, whatever was agreed to stays in the property. And this is also a good time to quickly have a look, typically in the bathrooms or under your sinks, to make sure nothing's been leaking, especially more so if the property's been sitting vacant for a while or during the winter, and to make sure the heat's running and everything before you get possession of the property and it becomes your problem to deal with. One of the reasons closings can be delayed as well is typically from the seller's side, that the seller is not able to provide a real property report with municipal compliance. So the City of Calgary doesn't stamp the RPR as compliant because typically common issues that we see are encroachments, fences on the neighbor's side and things like that. The seller is contractually obligated to provide you with a real property report with municipal compliance at closing. So if they can't provide this, often this is going to delay the closing process. Sometimes there might be a holdback applied, or in other cases, the closings itself might be delayed depending on the severity of the issue. Right? Some other reasons that also delay closings along the same line of thought is caveats on title or restrictive covenants that were not previously disclosed, or pending registrations on title that were not disclosed up front. So if you're a seller, you are aware that you might have pending registrations coming up, such as you're transferring title to an executor or something of that sort. You're planning to sell the property. Make sure you disclose all of this information upfront to your realtor and to your lender and your lawyer, just so everyone's on the same page. The last thing anyone needs, especially in a real estate transaction, is surprises, especially on closing day, because often it's too late to sort these things out. If you're a buyer and you're buying a property expecting vacant possession that had tenants in it when you first viewed it, make sure you check with your realtor and make sure you get the message across and ensure that proper notice has been given by the seller to their tenants so that you get vacant possession on time. Often this is part of the due diligence your buyer's realtor would do, but it never hurts to be extra cautious. Okay? So as a seller, if you have tenants and you're expecting your tenants to be gone so that you can give vacant possession to the buyer, if there's a fixed term lease, there's not really an option unless the lease ends as of X date, unless you do a cash for keys arrangement or something of that sort. But if it's a month-to-month agreement, a sale is one of the reasons that you can end the periodic tenancy. And the notice period is 3 calendar months. This is often confused with 90-day notice, and this is not the case. 90-day notice is not equals to 3 calendar months. So make sure you understand this distinction when you give your tenants notice, because if you give them improper notice and your tenants don't leave as of the day you're expecting them to leave, this could become problematic when the buyer is expecting vacant possession on closing. The tenants are not leaving because they have the right to leave because they weren't given proper notice, and you as a seller are now on the hook for damages. Another thing that can delay or postpone your closing date is if there was a set of repairs that were expected to be completed by typically the seller of the property, if they were expected to complete certain agreed upon repairs and they were not done to a satisfactory standard, this can often delay the closing or result in a holdback depending on how severe the issue that was supposed to be done is. So this is something you want to make sure you're following up on during the waiting period in between you going firm and closing. And you want to make sure you verify this during your pre-possession walkthrough as well with your realtor. One way to mitigate kind of such issues is often, like what we like to do as best practice, is make sure that if any repairs are to be done, proof of those repairs are to be provided, and they have to be done by a certified or licensed professional, especially if it relates to a specific trade. So that's how we address this issue, and that's how we would recommend you proceed as well. One more thing that we recommend if you're purchasing a property is to always get insurance quotes during the conditional or due diligence period. That way you don't have any hidden surprises later. There have been instances where buyers have waived conditions on a property that it's now a firm sale, and then they go and get insurance quotes and they realize that either the insurer doesn't want to insure the property because it has the property's not favorable because maybe it has poly B, or in the case of Century Homes, they might have knob and tube wiring, which insurers are not comfortable with these days. Or you might be faced with a really, really steep insurance premium that you were not really expecting up front. One other thing that could happen is unexpected events that come up between condition removal and your closing date. So this could be stuff like hail damage, water leaks, or even a fire that takes place. What will happen in this type of scenario is often the seller of the property would have to initiate an insurance claim, and there's often going to be holdbacks that will be implemented between the buyer's lawyer and the seller's lawyer. And this is often going to be a negotiation between both parties. So given the nature of this, you can expect that there will be delays involved in closing, and it won't close on time.
Yeah, so as for delays at closing that we see, one of the things that the lender will often come up with, as previously mentioned by Santosh, is that the insurance hasn't been taken care of. If you run into problems, then you reach out to us and we can possibly help you with those lenders who have issues with specific types of property, like maybe hail damage, maybe solar panels, maybe just different aspects, a pond or a pool in the backyard. And often a combination of products makes it more challenging because some lenders are great at one thing, some lenders are great at another, but when you combine those two things, it makes it even more challenging. So make sure you get ahead of that, especially if you don't have a cookie cutter house, or there might be one or two things that could impact whether an insurer will want to provide it. In Alberta, that's become a pretty big issue. So get ahead of the insurance. It's become an issue a lot more often than it has been in the past. The common stuff that we have seen, we've seen, maybe a backyard suite that hasn't been fully legalized, even though it's been used for a long time. And then we combine that with some poly B, and we combine that with some solar panels, for example. And just the combination of those few things, you can find an insurance into each one of those things, especially if it might be a rental property on top of it. When you combine all of those different things, then you start narrowing down and cutting out the different options available. So it might be great with rental properties, but those particular insurers aren't great with backyard suites, or some might be good with solar, but those particular lenders might not be great with knob and tube wiring or even aluminum wiring, and just under no circumstance will they do it. So then you combine those two and all of a sudden you cannot find a lender that will do both. So that becomes more of a challenge. One of the things that is actually quite common is small changes between the time of waiving conditions and the time of actual closing. So a home inspection or some kind of negotiation or something will even happen with the property, or the furnace will go. The seller will let the buyer know, the realtors will negotiate a price reduction or negotiate a cashback to replace the furnace. Now the problem with that is that cashback actually isn't something that's allowed to be done. You can't do it as a cashback. It has to actually be done as a price reduction. And that can be done as a price reduction. We just need enough time to redo all the paperwork. If it's done as a cashback, the problem is the mortgage lender has no way of knowing with certainty that that's going to be done. And technically on a 95% mortgage, they'd be lending over 95% loan to value in the case of how that cashback works, until they know the furnace is done. So we could still accomplish the same thing, so you don't have to come up with the entire cost of that furnace out of pocket as a buyer, we can do something called the purchase plus improvements, which is a roundabout way of building that cost into the mortgage, and still ensuring that you're able to finance it, but then the lender has some certainty because they won't release the full funds until the furnace is actually complete. So you can use your credit card to finish it, and they'll reimburse that. So you know that it doesn't have to come out of your pocket, but it doesn't put you in a position where at closing the lender just has an issue with the fact that there's a cashback involved, which is not something that's allowed in real estate.
Thanks for watching. I hope you got value from this video. If you've had an issue at closing, let us know what happened down below in the comment section. Please subscribe as well. It helps the algorithm. See you on the next one.